February 25, 1945. Morning in ruined Eldorf drifted by in a familiar gray haze, the kind you taste before you even open your eyes. I stood on my turret, boots sinking into a thin crust of frost, watching the street ahead breathe cold white air. Shermans idled along the roadside, their engines humming that lazy, unbothered tune we all pretended meant safety. Mechanics checked track tension with numb fingers, someone smoked a cigarette down to the paper, someone else made the same old joke about Ronsons. On most days this scene felt almost peaceful, if you ignored the ruins, the rubble, the smell of burnt plaster that never left your clothes. War had rhythms, and by February we all marched to them without thinking. But not today. Because one tank in the column didn't fit the pattern. Ours. She was larger. Broader in the shoulders. Armor that didn't ring hollow when you tapped it. The paint still smelled factory fresh, as if the war hadn't had time to mark her yet. The T-26E3, Fireball. My tank. I remember the moment everything went quiet. Really quiet, in a way it never should in a town full of engines. The air shifted. My breath stopped halfway out of my lungs. And down the distant street, past the collapsed storefronts and shattered rooflines, a shadow stirred. Not movement. Not noise. Just presence. A shape too still to be natural. Too deliberate to be debris. I felt the hairs rise at the back of my neck. Because I knew, before the radio crackled, before the infantry signaled, before anyone else in the column noticed, that whatever was waiting for us out there wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of moment every tanker lives through only once. The moment when the world acts like nothing unusual is happening. But you feel history tightening its grip around your throat. And you know something is coming. Something worse than anything you've met before. 4 years before Eldorf, I'd been fighting inside machines that felt more like coffins than armor. Shermans were good at moving, good at swarming, good at burning. Everyone knew it. Us, the Germans, the crows picking at the wrecks. I remember letters from my old crew back in France, the ink smudged by rain and fear. We lose 2 tanks so the third can flank and kill. That was the law whether anyone wrote it down or not. I'd watch German Panthers and Tigers carve through our lines like they were solving equations. Exact shots, perfect angles, cold efficiency. Their guns punched through us from ranges where our own rounds bounced like thrown pebbles. Every time I climbed into a Sherman, I could feel the thin armor in my bones. I could feel how quickly a bad moment turned into fire. High command in Washington insisted the Sherman was good enough. Good enough for doctrine, good enough for numbers, good enough because the book said so. But doctrine didn't ride into battle with us. Doctrine didn't hear the screams when a hit tore through the hull. Doctrine didn't help you when the first shot turned your tank into a torch. By late 44, we weren't fighting the enemy anymore, we were fighting assumptions. German superiority wasn't theory, it was something we tasted every time a Panther locked onto us before we even saw it. And on their side? Confidence, earned, reinforced, repeated. German crews rode home as if victory were a formality. They believed their armor was superior steel forged for a superior army, and in those months, it was hard to argue. Panthers dominated the long fields. Tigers owned the forest. Even when we outnumbered them, the cost was always obscene. But somewhere between Aachen and the Ardennes, a sentence had begun forming quietly in every American tanker's mind: we need something that can stand against them. And somewhere in a workshop far from the front, someone finally listened. That's the tension I carried with me to Eldorf, the weight of old rules that had killed too many of my friends. The Germans believed the game was fixed in their favor. Hell, most days we believed it too. But as I stood on Fireball's turret that morning, I felt something else rising. Something sharp, something new. Because today the old rules were about to snap. The attack on Eldorf should have been routine. One more slow push through another gutted German village. Infantry moved first, ghosts slipping between broken walls. Shermans rolled behind them in a neat line, engines humming steady and predictable. I'd seen this choreography 100 times. Advance, poke, wait for the inevitable crack of a Panther's gun, pray it hit someone else. But today our column carried a new weight. Fireball rumbled behind the lead Shermans, her engine deeper, her tracks biting into the frozen mud with a confidence nothing else on that road had. I sat inside her turret, headset humming, feeling the quiet promise of the 90mm gun resting inches from my shoulder. We were still learning her language, but she already felt like something dangerous, something that didn't accept the rules. Then the German ambush snapped into place. Movement, 12 o'clock, the infantry radioed. A second later I saw it, clean, precise, unmistakable. A Panther, hull down behind rubble at the end of the street, gun already settling onto our lead tank. Perfect position. Perfect distance. A kill he must have thought was guaranteed. The Shermans kept rolling because they didn't see it yet. But I did. My throat tightened. Panther front, range 600. I called. Clarence, my gunner, shifted before I finished the sentence. The turret swung, gears whining. Through the gun sight he breathed, target on. The Panther's barrel twitched, adjusting for the first kill of the morning. That single heartbeat felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Every lesson from France to the Ardennes said the same thing. Don't bother shooting the front of a Panther. It won't go through. Not with what we've got. I could almost hear old commanders barking it in my ear. But Fireball wasn't a Sherman. And this was the moment to prove it. Fire. The 90mm roared, filling the turret with heat and concussion. The recoil slammed the turret ring so hard I felt it in my ribs. The AP round streaked down the ruined street like a thrown spear. What happened next didn't feel real. The shot punched straight through the Panther's turret face, armor that was supposed to be untouchable. For a second nothing moved, just a bright hole glowing in the steel. Then flames burst from every hatch, and the tank's gun sagged like it had lost the strength to keep fighting. Inside Fireball no one spoke. We just stared through the smoke as the Panther turned into a burning coffin. That was the exact second I felt the world tilt. On our side, shock, disbelief, a flicker of hope. On theirs, hesitation, the most dangerous thing on any battlefield. Because in that moment, everyone watching understood the same truth. The rules had just shattered. Eldorf wasn't an ending. It was ignition. The moment that Panther went up, something broke loose in the war, something we could all feel but none of us could name. Word traveled faster than tanks ever could. By the time we refueled, Battalion was already whispering, a Pershing killed a Panther head-on. No one said it loudly. Saying it out loud made it real, and nobody knew what reality looked like now. From that day forward, Fireball felt like a magnet for every desperate German trick left in the book. Ambushes sharpened. Pack guns crawled into doorways like metal spiders. Panthers tried flanking dances they used to win effortlessly. Even King Tigers showed up, slow, sullen beasts dragging what was left of German hope behind them. But we kept meeting them. And we kept surviving. At the Roar, another Pershing Eagle 7 dueled a King Tiger across a fog-soaked field. I watched from the ridge as its 90mm slammed into the Tiger again and again, hammering the monster until it finally stopped moving. Nobody cheered. We just stared. A thing we'd been taught to fear like a god had just folded. Later, near Cologne, we pushed into a street choked with rubble and smoke. A German Pak-43 cracked a shot straight into a Pershing's frontal armor, point blank, the kind of hit that should have peeled a Sherman open like fruit. Instead, the round ricocheted, whining off into the ruins. The Pershing didn't even pause. Its return shot erased the gun crew in a single flash that lit the whole intersection orange. That kind of moment does things to men. On our side, the air inside the turret shifted. There was a new weight to our breathing, not relief, not victory, something harder. The knowledge that for once, we weren't walking into a slaughterhouse. For once, someone else was flinching first. On the German side, we felt the change in the way they moved. No more confident prowling. No more leisurely setups. They deployed like hunted things, hiding behind collapsed barns, shifting positions too often, firing too fast. Their ambushes became frantic instead of elegant. Their shots rang out at odd angles, rushed, jittery. Fireball led more pushes now. Shermans followed us instead of shielding us. We weren't flanking anymore, we were forcing. Breaking lines instead of dodging them. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Panther crews through binoculars, helmets turning too quickly, commanders hesitating before showing their silhouettes. Their confidence, their armor, was cracking long before their steel was. Each clash wrote the same truth across the battlefield. The Germans still had machines, but we finally had something that made them bleed. Behind every shot we fired, every Panther we sent burning into the sky, there were men, tired, shivering, quiet men carrying months of fear in their chests. I'd spent most of the war in Shermans, praying the first hit wouldn't be the last thing I ever felt. Inside those thin steel walls, you learn to move carefully, breathe lightly, and never let your imagination get too loud. The worst part wasn't dying, it was knowing you wouldn't even have time to understand it. My gunner, Clarence Smoyer, used to whisper before every engagement, "Just let me see him first. Just 1 second first." That was all Sherman crews ever wanted. 1 second. 1 second to fire, 1 second to run, 1 second to live. But Fireball was different. The first time we took a real hit, an 88mm that screamed out of a tree near Durin, we all braced for death. I felt the turret shake, felt the metal groan, and I waited for the fire. Instead, the round bounced, shrieking into the sky like it was the one afraid. When the dust settled, none of us moved. We were alive. Actually alive. Clarence broke the silence. Jesus, we actually bounced it. No one laughed. It wasn't funny. It was a kind of guilt and gratitude tangled together. How many friends had died because their tanks weren't ready in time? Our mechanic O'Hara carried that guilt worst of all. He'd seen too many Shermans come back as charred stumps. He'd scrubbed too many blood pools out of hulls. When he ran his hands over Fireball's armor, he did it like a man touching something sacred. If we'd had these sooner, he muttered once, half the boys from Normandy would still be riding home. On the German side you could see the opposite transformation. Burned survivors of Panthers who used to laugh at us now stared in hollow disbelief. Captured officers talked about a new American heavy tank, with a tone that told you they didn't believe their own words yet. One young German tanker, barely 19, told me in perfect English, "We thought you were running out of ideas. Then you brought this. War isn't just metal, it's the people trapped inside it." And once Pershings rolled onto the field, everything we felt, fear, hope, anger, guilt, shifted. The battlefield didn't just change in strategy. It changed in the hearts beating underneath the armor. We weren't invincible. We weren't even safe. But for the first time we weren't helpless. By March 45, the war felt like a great steel door finally giving way. Every town we pushed through, Cologne, Remagen, the Ruhr, echoed with the same rhythm. Pershings forward, Shermans close behind, infantry running tight along the walls. The Germans no longer maneuvered like hunters. They scrambled, improvised, hid in alleys and factories trying to survive the day instead of shape it. But the climax, the moment everything truly broke, came outside Cologne. We rolled in behind the infantry as the sky turned the color of ash. Smoke curled across the streets, shattered windows reflected our silhouettes like ghosts. Then a report cracked through the radio, "Heavy armor ahead. Unknown type." That phrase always made my teeth clench. We advanced carefully. Every corner felt like it held a trigger. Then I saw it, a massive German tank idling at the end of a boulevard, framed by flames licking up broken storefronts. His gun was thick, mean, confident. A King Tiger, fortress on tracks, the beast we'd all feared long before we'd ever seen one. I heard Clarence exhale. "That's the big one." The Tiger fired first. The round slammed into a Pershing ahead of us, front plate, dead center. On any other tank it would have opened a doorway straight into hell. Instead, the shell skipped, screamed, and died against armor built for moments exactly like this. The Pershing didn't flinch, didn't retreat, didn't even hesitate. Its 90mm answered with a thunderclap that echoed off the cathedral's ruined stone. Smoke swallowed the Tiger's turret. Another shot followed, then a third. The great machine shuddered, coughed fire, and sagged. Flame poured from it seems like breath escaping a dying animal. By the time Fireball rolled past it, the giant was nothing but a burning monument to a doctrine that had finally run out of miracles. Across the front, the same collapse repeated itself. German reports screamed the same warning: avoid frontal combat. Engage from flanks only. But they no longer had fuel for maneuver, ammo for prolonged fights, or men trained enough to pull off the kinds of traps that once crushed us. Their armored core wasn't just losing machines. It was losing the idea of itself. And as we advanced, faster, bolder, with a confidence we'd never been allowed to feel before, I realized the truth Germany had tried to hide for years. Steel had stopped obeying them. And the battlefield no longer spoke their language. When the shooting finally thinned out and the roads turned from killing grounds into supply routes, the truth settled over us heavier than the mud on our boots. Pershings hadn't appeared in great numbers, just enough to punch holes, enough to frighten the armor that once terrified us. But the psychological damage they dealt, that lived everywhere. I remember walking past rows of German POWs outside Remagen. Most looked like farm boys dragged into uniforms 2 sizes too big. But among them were tankers, men who once carried themselves like steel incarnate. One of them, older than the rest, watched Fireball roll by and muttered just loud enough for me to hear. When we saw that tank, we knew it was over. We had nothing left but pride. Pride. And pride doesn't stop a 90mm round. For us the shift was deeper. Something inside the American armored core cracked open and rewired itself. For years we'd fought in machines built for speed and doctrine, not survival. Now, staring at the ruined shapes of Panthers and Tigers we'd beaten cleanly, I understood the revelation. We didn't have to play the old game anymore. We didn't have to trade 3 Shermans for 1 kill. We didn't have to pray that flanking worked before someone burned. Fireball wasn't just a tank. She was a promise, proof that American steel could be more than good enough. That our factories, our engineers, our stubborn refusal to quit could reshape the battlefield faster than the enemy could adjust. In the weeks that followed, mechanics came to examine her armor. Commanders scribbled reports about her gun, her suspension, her performance under fire. You could feel the future humming in her engine, the lineage that would lead to Pattons, to Abrams, to every machine built on the belief that American crews deserved armor equal to their courage. But there was a darker truth beneath the victory. Looking at the charred hulks of Shermans left behind on the road to the Rhine, I felt a knot of anger I still haven't untied. How many friends died waiting for a tank like this? How many letters home never made it because someone decided the old doctrine was sufficient? Still, when I climbed into Fireball for the last time that spring, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. Not safety, not in this war, but a recognition that we'd earned the right to survive. In a Sherman, fear was your shadow. In a Pershing, fear stayed, but helplessness finally died. If you want more stories like this, more truths buried under smoke and steel, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me what battle you want to step into next.